the Chinese leadership has made it their business to ensure that the so-called rural-urban gap is addressed, and that this gap begins to narrow over time. And I think that the government has done a fairly good job of ensuring that everyone shares in the prosperity of the current situation. More and more young people who go to Chinese university are going to be studying things like AI, artificial intelligence, or quantum computing, or advanced telecommunications. And so China is going to be in a very good position. I think that the Bay Area economy has become like a startup economy, because this is going to continue to be a very dynamic growth hub that can reverberate its benefits throughout other parts of China.
Hello everyone, welcome to SFC Markets and Finance. In recent years, China has made a historic leap in economic strength and markedly improved people's living standards. In this process, how has China promoted high-quality development? What are the characteristics of the development model of Chinese modernization? With this question in mind, let's welcome Denis Simon, Clinical Professor of Global Business Technology at the Kenneth Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina. Hello, Professor Denis. Thank you for joining us today. You once used the word miracle to describe China's development over the past years. What changes in China have impressed you the most?
I've followed the entire path of China's modernization over these last 4+ decades. And in the process, the thing that has impressed me the most was the improvement in the quality of life for the general population. I think that for most people, their standard of living has improved. The quality of their nutrition has improved in terms of food. Their healthcare availability has improved, and their education has improved as well. And in more recent years, you can say that now there is a integrated national transportation system, communication system, and that people now have the ability to move across the country relatively smoothly at reasonable cost. And so this has helped to contribute to these improvements in the quality of life for the average citizen. So while clearly coastal China and the 14 coastal cities have been in the lead, increasingly the Chinese leadership has made it their business to ensure that the so-called rural-urban gap is addressed, and that this gap begins to narrow over time. And I think that the government has done a fairly good job of ensuring that everyone shares in the prosperity of the current situation. So it's not been easy. And, there's a very famous saying in China about economic reform. It's like crossing a river by feeling the stones. And I think the results speak for themselves.
What are the characteristics of the development model of Chinese modernization?
I think that some things stand out for me. One is education. Access to education, and also an effort to reform education at all levels, including, making some important changes in the Gaokao system, and also ensuring that Chinese universities become world-class institutions of learning and research and training. So that's, I think, one element is the investment in education has been very, very important. Second, I think, is the improvement in the healthcare system. I think that's also part of this modernization, to make sure that the average Chinese citizen has access to good healthcare, and that I think the government is spending time on building hospitals and improving the healthcare system, trying to keep the price of pharmaceuticals low so that they're affordable for everyone. I think that that's part of this. I think a third part, of course, is the maintaining the openness to the outside world. I think that's a critical piece to this, and even the first thing that we saw in the aftermath of the COVID lockdown was a return, of foreigners to get back to China if they're involved in businesses, if they're students, and if they're tourists, they come back. And finally, I think infrastructure development is an important part of this. Good quality housing for the average citizen, having that available. Also building up the transportation infrastructure, and of course the high-speed rail is the best example of that. But also in many cities now, you see modern subway systems that are providing good transportation for working people. I think that that's also an important part of this. We could add, some recent things also that are part of this. I think the onset of the so-called digital economy for China, the so-called cashless society, these things also are very, very important. China has been a global leader in e-commerce. It's been a leader in terms of providing the infrastructure for things like Alipay and WeChat. I think China has set in motion the ability to skip some of the stages, you might say, of Western modernization and go right to this next stage of digitalization. I think that's going to also be a very important part of Chinese modernization when we think about it, in a couple of years. So all of these things, are part of the Chinese model. And as I said before, it's making sure that the effects of prosperity get shared by as many people as possible.
On the topic of China's economy, you once said that China is no longer just looking at the growth of GDP numbers. How does China promote high-quality development?
I think with the growing sense that China must improve the quality of growth, I think now officials are being judged on what kind of growth, what are the sources of growth. And I think this has to do in particular with the onset of the so-called innovation-driven economy, that an innovation-driven economy or a knowledge economy is something that as China builds out in these areas, it is going to hopefully change the type of growth in terms of the sources of this growth. More and more young people who go to Chinese university are going to be studying things like AI, artificial intelligence, or quantum computing, or advanced telecommunications. And so China is going to be in a very good position for its young people to take on the jobs of the future. And I think we are going to see some dramatic changes in the workplace in China as the years progress forward. And maybe that means more robotics, more automation, more use of AI, smart cars, smart cities, smart vehicles. In other words, this is all part of this focus on quality that I think that the leadership is very intentionally trying to invest in and trying to move people in that kind of direction. I think it's very healthy for China.
You have mentioned that China is becoming more market-oriented. In the field of science and technology, how will marketization affect the development of China's science and technology industry?
Well, it's very clear that even though in the Chinese case the role of government support is very, very critical, ultimately, the source of innovation really comes from technological entrepreneurship. In a number of limited cases, the so-called top-down approach, does work, and the strong government intervention is very good. But at the end of the day, I think it's also important to recognize that technological entrepreneurs really are the juice that really makes technological advance go forward. and that we need to ensure that entrepreneurs have enough room, to pursue their interests in the marketplace, and that at the end, the competition is good for everybody. There'll be winners and losers, but hopefully through competition, particularly regarding the best ideas and the newest information, etc., that this will help to stimulate technological advance and help to make sure that it is a ongoing, sustainable process. And so I'm not arguing against governments playing a role. I think that is important. And there are some social issues like healthcare, for example, where sometimes the market doesn't always play the role, particularly when there are limited populations and the market size is smaller. And we do need, pharmaceutical companies or life science companies to develop the next generation of technology, and they require, support from the government. But more generally speaking, I think, an open and free market is much more helpful to spurring on these entrepreneurial instincts. And particularly in China, more recently, scientists and engineers in universities and in companies have been given greater encouragement to pursue their entrepreneurial instincts. China has a vast number of high-tech parks and high-tech zones, and there are lots of different sources of funding, including venture capital coming from within China and abroad to help to support these entrepreneurial efforts. So I think that as long as the market is not encumbered by excessive government intervention, that the prospect of innovation moving forward is very good. And I'm hoping that we can see beyond the Alibabas and Tencents and Baidu, we will see the next generation of companies emerge who will provide the leadership for China's technological advance. And as I suggested, that probably are going to be the ingredients to drive the digital economy. Finally, I think the best example for all of this is the electric car sector. We can see just how rapidly it has grown and just how advanced it has become because the competition, healthy competition, has helped to drive the cutting edge of battery technology and of automobile performance and safety as well. And I think that this is a very good case example of to see how the market can work in a very, very positive kind of way.
As the global supply chain pattern and international division of labor accelerate to address, how has China's position and role in the system changed?
A number of companies, have talked about moving components of their supply chain out from China to places like Vietnam, India, and several other countries. But one thing that we have to always remember, it took many of these multinational companies like Apple, for example, many, many years, in fact, decades, to build up an effective infrastructure so that its supply chain in China could work as well as it has been. And this has helped contribute to Apple's long-term success. It's not easy for Apple simply to pick up the pieces and move, critical aspects of the supply chain to other countries. As you know, Foxconn, or the Taiwan company Honhai, has been critically important in working with Apple to serve as its major contract manufacturing arm to help Apple grow its products and its capabilities. And I think that it's easier said than done. The reality is that not so many countries have the type of infrastructure that China has built to make it easy to just lift up these pieces of the supply chain and move them wherever they might go to, in around the world. So I think that a number of companies don't want to see this happen. They would like to see, frankly, not only an improvement in the bilateral relationship, but they would like to be in China working with Chinese companies to migrate to that next level where as I mentioned, robotics, automation, artificial intelligence now are going to play a bigger role in the production of goods and services in the future.
The IMF expects the slowdown this year to be concentrated in advanced economies. How about the slipover effects of China's economic growth on the global economy?
Population, I mean, the average consumer is becoming more sophisticated. Before something that was foreign branded just sold in China simply because it was branded, with a foreign company's name. This is no longer the case. I think the competition, whether it's for cell phones or for automobiles, we've seen Tesla face a very difficult time in the Chinese market as it competes with BYD. And I think other kinds of competition are the same in foods, in clothing, etc. So my guess is that China has the wherewithal to continue with a sustainable growth of somewhere between 5 to 6% at least at the minimum. And my guess is that if the innovation-driven economy can get some greater momentum, that we probably will even see perhaps even a higher level of growth into the future. And new industries are emerging in China all the time. The aerospace industry, I think, is going to become very, very interesting in China now that the C919 has been produced and it's being used in the Chinese airline industry. I think that we're going to start to see China emerge as a key player in aerospace, joining Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, and a number of other companies as important players. So there are many things that are yet to happen in the Chinese economy that could provide very important sources of growth.
Last year, the economic aggregate of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area exceeded 13 trillion RMB, making it one of the top 10 major economies in the world. What is the economic potential of the Greater Bay Area?
There are a couple of things about the Greater Bay Area that intrigue me. Number one is the investment in higher education. The number of universities that have been built, the number even including joint venture universities like the one involving Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And I think that this area is going to turn into a very, very important center for higher education in the future, which means that it's going to become a talent magnet in the future. And I think that the local economic officials in the area are counting on there being a high availability of good talent to run the next generation of companies and industries that are going to take place there. The second thing that intrigues me is that the arrangements for the free flow of capital is very, very important. Not only do we see good people mobility, but we see the mobility of capital and leveraging on Hong Kong's reputation as an international financial center. I think that is very, very important. A third, I think just watching the economic infrastructure, that's being built with transportation, communication, etc. That's all highly relevant to helping to support long-term economic growth. I think that's a very important part, and the connectivity of that area with not only the rest of China, but also the rest of Asia. And then finally, I've talked about talent, but I want to return again to the notion of entrepreneurship. I think that the Bay Area economy has become like a startup economy because this is going to continue to be a very dynamic growth hub that can reverberate its benefits throughout other parts of China and serve as not only just a model, but also as an engine of growth. And Southern China has always played that role.
Thanks to Professor Denis for sharing your views with us today. As Professor Denis said, China has realized the importance of improving the quality of its growth, which is related to an innovation-driven economy. In the future, more young people will develop in the fields of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or advanced telecommunication technology. And China will also be very well positioned for development. That's all for today's show. Thank you. See you.